Wonderful. Well, it's fantastic to be with you. My name's Andy. I'm part of the team here at Croydon Vineyard. If you don't know me, if it's your first time, a real welcome to you. It's fantastic to have you with us this summer morning. You've made a great decision. We've been teaching through this summer a series called Triumph in Trouble. And we've been looking at the life of Jesus, particularly from two chapters in the New Testament, the book of Luke, chapter 22 and 23. And we've seen different elements of trouble that Jesus got into and how he triumphed in that trouble. And there's a few reasons why we've done this. There's at least a few reasons why we've done this. One thing we've wanted to do is try and cure a little bit of naivety. So often in the Christian life, maybe particularly in our stream, the kind of charismatic, evangelical stream, we can think, oh, God's on my side. What could possibly go wrong? And we walk through and we're kind of super breezy, and then life has a habit of kicking us where it hurts. And it's like, oh, I didn't expect that. But as we see it in the life of Jesus, we can think, okay, I've got somewhere to go. He's already walked this path before me. I can see who he is, what he's like. That is what can happen in this life. How can I handle it? And not only handle it, but see how to triumph in trouble. We really believe that kind of life isn't just something that you grit your teeth and bear and hold on, and the Christian life is kind of holding on until you get to the end, but that actually you can triumph in trouble. That Jesus can work through you, that Jesus can move through you, that he can bring victories even in the darkest chapter of our lives. And then maybe the key reason that we've done this series is because we just love taking a long, hard look at Jesus. He's the best. He's the best. He's the King of Kings. He's the Lord of Lords. He's the one that we want to look to. He's the one that we long for. He's the one that we marvel at. He's the one that we gaze on. He's the one that feeds us. He's the one that forms us. He's the one that we follow. And so we just love taking a long, hard look at Jesus. And you can learn a certain amount about somebody when they're in a sunny chapter of their lives. But do you know what? You really see somebody when they go through a dark chapter. That reveals even greater level of character. And the Gospels, they seem to take, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, they seem to take an inordinate amount of time on the last week of Jesus' life. You know, I would have loved a little bit more detail about some of the miracles. Even some of what they ate, where they went walking, some of the banter, I'd have loved a bit more detail. But they had a certain amount of parchment, and they seemed to think, here's what the church is really going to need. They're really going to need to see how he handled the last week of his life, the Passion Week. There's a tradition in some of the Catholic streams of the church, Stations of the Cross, where they take usually 14 of the images from Jesus' final week of what happened. And they just go, and they just sit, and they think about that scene. They meditate on Jesus. And that seems to be in the pattern of the Gospels, where they just continually put up for us. This is what happened. This was how he handled it. This is what he's like. This is what you need to look on. Especially when life gets dark and it becomes a difficult chapter of your life. This is a source that you can draw from again and again and again. And, you know, in our New Testament journey, we mix it up a bit. We put the Gospels through the years. But a lot of times in the past, maybe you've started your Bible reading plan on Matthew, Mark, Luke. It's like, this is the same again and again. It's like, yeah, 'cause this is what we need. This is what we need, to look on him again and again, and how he handled the Passion Week, how he handled the darkest chapter of his life, how he triumphed in trouble. And we can find wisdom for how we can handle things, and we can find fuel for our worship. We can learn how to triumph in trouble, and we can look at the one who triumphed over every trouble for us. So we're into chapter 23 today, and we're going to look at three particular kinds of trouble that Jesus encountered. So we'll just get the first one up. We've got some nice big chunks of scripture today. And this is around all the time of Jesus' trial. He's coming to Jerusalem. He's in trouble with the law. And here he is. Then the whole assembly rose and led him off to Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, "We have found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Messiah, a king." So Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You have said so," Jesus replied. Then Pilate announced to the chief priests and the crowd, "I find no basis for a charge against this man." But they insisted, "He stirs up the people all over Judea by his teaching. He started in Galilee and has come all the way here." On hearing this, Pilate asked if the man was a Galilean. When he learned that Jesus was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was greatly pleased, because for a long time he had been wanting to see him. From what he had heard about him, he hoped to see him perform a sign of some sort. He plied him with many questions. In that little section there, we see a kind of trial that Jesus faced, not for the first time in his life. It's the trial of rumor. The trial of rumor. Let's keep you with me. Can everybody say rumor? There we go. Rumor. Rumor. Jesus was there, and he was being talked about, and different people were saying different things about him. I wonder, in your life, how have you handled rumor? How have you handled other people speaking about you? Or even the idea that somebody else was speaking about you? This goes all the way from the playground to the boardroom. "Oh, I think he fancies that girl over there. What did you say about me? I don't fancy her. I only looked at her once. No, you're wrong. I've heard he's going to be passed over for promotion because he doesn't get to the office early enough. I've heard this about them." How have you handled rumor in your life? This is a difficult one for the human heart to handle. The rumor trouble, the rumor trial. And we see here in the case of Jesus, the people around him were saying some different things. They said he was subverting our nation. They said he was opposing payment of tax to Caesar. They said he claims to be the Messiah. They said the fruit of his teaching is agitation. They said he's a miracle worker, and they were accusing him. And so what you have is some truth. They were saying some truth about Jesus. He was a miracle worker. There was quite a lot of twist. He's agitating our nation. He's subverting our people. There's a bit of twist in that. And there was some trash. Okay? He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. And about you, sometimes out there, what's being said about you is some truth. She lives here, she does that. There'll be some twist. Because she's hungry for money. Because he fell out with him. Because he wants to be first place. And maybe there'll be some trash. People saying things about you that aren't true. This is the grubby reality that we live in, post-fall, life under the sun. The perfect man, Jesus, walked the earth. And one of the trials that he faced was the trial of rumor. Things out there about him, some true, some twist, some trash. And we'll have to face this again and again. Often it will coincide with a time of transition in your life, a big change. Maybe when you move to a new place or a new career, a new workplace, a new relationship, something's taken a new turn. There'll be some truth about you, some twist about you, and some trash about you. This is your human experience. So how do you handle that? Do you know the natural human response is, I need to manage my reputation. I need to get out there in front of the narrative. with how I dress, with how I speak. Maybe I'll have a quiet word to the pastor. It would be quite good if actually these people stop saying this about me, and get out in front, manage the narrative, maintain my reputation. Oh, that's being said about me. Well, I'm going to put this photo on social media about me, and that will say something very different. Thank you very much. Smash the like button. Okay? We want to manage. We want to strive. Okay? This can drive a lot of our behavior. How does Jesus handle the rumor trial? You can think about so many different cards that Jesus had to play. He was smarter than the people out there. He was the best orator that's ever existed. He was amazingly clever. He was amazingly wise. He could have performed a miracle. He could have done writing in the sky. He could have done any number of things. How did Jesus, in this particular instance, handle the rumor trial? Just spin on one, Sam. But Jesus gave him no answer. Jesus played the no response card. Christian, how many of you know you don't have to respond? You don't have to respond. You don't have to give the emotional energy, the fuel, the effort. That is an option in your pack of cards for when you play life, is the no response card. I don't have to get involved. As the sheep before its shearers were silent, so he gave them no answer. Now look, we always exercise caution when we take teaching from narrative. There are other times when Jesus handled the rumor trial in a slightly different way. There's wisdoms, there's exceptions. Your specific situation might mean that at times it's right to speak up, it's right to speak out, it's right to correct the record. There are wisdom and discernment. But today, I just want us to look at Jesus and see there is an option. You cannot respond. You cannot respond. And maybe you're thinking, yeah, but they said this about me, and I can't have them thinking about that because of this. And if they think this about me, then this will go like that. All these kind of things. How can I play the no response card? And I think we see from the life of Jesus the truth that in Jesus, there's a verdict over you which is more important than the voices around you. In Jesus, there's a verdict over you which is more important than the voices around you. He's a glutton. He's demon-possessed. He's an agitator. He's a rebel. He claims to be this. He claims to be that. The verdict over Jesus was, this is my son, whom I love. In him I am well pleased. The verdict over him was more important than the voices around him. He didn't have to respond. He didn't have to respond because the verdict over him was more important than the voices around him. I love this about Jesus. I love this about Jesus. I mean, healing the sick is amazing. Healing the sick is amazing. But have you ever watched someone walk with grace when their reputation was being trashed? That's impressive. That's impressive. That amazes me about Jesus. As the sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. So when life throws you the rumor trial, there is an option. You cannot respond because the verdict over you is more important than the voices around you. Okay, we good? All right, let's make it a little bit more difficult then. Okay, next part of the trial that Jesus faced. The chief priests and the teachers of the law were standing there, vehemently accusing him. Then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him. Dressing him in an elegant robe, they sent him back to Pilate. That day Herod and Pilate became friends before they had been enemies. The next trial that Jesus walked through was the trial of ridicule. Everybody say ridicule. Okay. I find some of these verses in the Gospels, they're some of the ones that really stick in my throat. It's like thinking about these soldiers mocking the one that we sing to, the one that we love. And it's like, didn't you know who was in front of you? Didn't you see his character? Didn't you see what he was like? How could you say these things to Jesus? How could you go there in that place? This is something that Jesus went through. And again, you think of all the cards that Jesus could have played. Calling down fire. He could reveal their personal histories. He could have escaped. He could have done so many different things. And yet here he is, sitting under ridicule. We do an English school here at the church. We're on summer break at the moment, but we teach classes to primarily refugees and asylum seekers, but people from many nations. And so I often find myself in conversations about education. And I often find myself in conversations about people's school experience. And it used to surprise me, but it doesn't anymore because it's happened so many times. Is that we'd be chatting, having dinner about someone, and without even prompting somebody too much or at all, when we start talking about somebody's school days, and this can be a very impressive together adult, they will come out with, "This teacher said this to me." And they still remember the exact place, the exact scene, the exact time, and more importantly, how it made them feel. Ridicule, whether it's from a teacher, whether it's from peers, is an incredibly difficult trial for the human heart to handle. It's an incredibly difficult trial for the human heart to handle. And our natural inclination is to carry it with us. Either in a kind of, oh yes, what they said about me is right, and a kind of taking it on board and living by it and accepting it, or in a kind of retaliatory, I'm going to prove them wrong, they're going to see who I am, chip on the shoulder, I'm going to keep going and prove them wrong. It is something that can move our hearts in a very, very profound way. The problem with either of those responses, the kind of taking it on and accepting it response, or the I'm going to prove them wrong response, is what it does to our hearts, which is either to leave us crushed on the one hand or callous on the other. It can either leave us crushed or callous. And so I'm wondering if there's a better way to triumph in that trial. Well, earlier in the book of Luke, in Jesus' ministry, when the sun was still shining and the crowd was more on side, Jesus gave his followers a card. He gave them a teaching. He says this in Luke 6. "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Know you're blessed and rejoice because of that. Now, maybe some of them hearing that teaching at the time when Jesus gave it were thinking, this is naive, this is idealistic, this is too much. But then when we push forward into Luke 22, we see Jesus in the hands of Roman soldiers, dressed in a mocking robe. Now, it's not explicit in the story what Jesus did, what Jesus felt at that time. But we know he's a man of his word. We know he's a man of his word. He would have known he's blessed, and he would have rejoiced in the greater story. The book of Hebrews says, for the joy that was set before him, he took on the cross, he scorned its shame. He could have played the call down fire, but he calls down forgiveness. He could have sought revenge. Instead, he seeks redemption. Because the story that you're in is bigger than the slander that they bring. The story that you're in is bigger than the slander that they bring. This is how he walked. This is who he was. This is what he did. This is how he handled it. The story that he was in was bigger than the slander that they bring. This is how we can walk. This is how we can walk. And the no retaliation thing, it can feel almost ridiculous to us as humans. It's like, oh, but you don't know what they said to me. You don't know what they did to me. But we're in a society, we're in a civilization that's been shaped by this word and by this example. I'm guessing that not too many of us woke up this morning and the first thing on our mind was the blood debt that we needed to get vengeance for. Liz is laughing. Maybe she did. We've been shaped by this man. We've been shaped by this teaching. Our society is based on this way. But if we lose the foundation, we won't be able to do it. But if you see that the story that you're in is bigger than the slander that they bring, then you can walk this way and follow this example, follow the way of Jesus. Okay, we'll do one more. And we saved the hardest till last. 13, yeah. Pilate called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people, and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who is inciting the people to rebellion. I have examined him in your presence and have found no basis for your charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us. As you can see, he has done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will punish him and then release him." But the whole crowd shouted, "Away with this man! Release Barabbas to us." Barabbas had been thrown into prison for an insurrection in the city and for murder. Wanting to release Jesus, Pilate appealed to them again, but they kept shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him." For the third time he spoke to them, "Why? What crime has this man committed? I have found in him no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore I will have him punished and then release him." But with loud shouts they insistently demanded that he be crucified, and their shouts prevailed. So Pilate decided to grant their demand. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, the one they asked for, and surrendered Jesus to their will. Third trial Jesus faced in this section is the trial of rejection. Everybody say rejection. Sticks in the throat, doesn't it? It's perhaps one of the toughest cards that life can play. You don't get picked for the school sports team or the school production. The person you fancy starts going out with someone else. Maybe it becomes increasingly clear that a sibling has more of your parents' affection than you do. The company chooses another candidate after you gave your best effort in an interview. You lose out on promotion to a colleague. Someone betrays you or simply has a better offer. Here's the thing. Jesus, the one we sing to, the one we love, is very familiar with rejection. That moment when you were rejected, Jesus is stood alongside you. He's not shocked by it. He's not perturbed by it. He is familiar with it. This is a card he knows how to handle very, very well. He came to his own, and his own received him not. John 1:11. He was despised and rejected. Isaiah 53. Again, think of the cards Jesus could have responded with. Vengeance, public relations, escape. But the card that Jesus responded with, the way that he walked, the way that he went, is the way of agape love. Jesus, in the next days, would go on to die for those who rejected him. This is how we know what love is. That whilst we were still sinners, whilst we were still pouring rejection on Jesus, he died for us, in our place, for our sake, in agape love. He had said earlier, but to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. Seems incredible, but this is the example that Jesus gave us. It's the example, it's the modus operandi of the early church. The disciples laid down for those who were rejecting them. It was through the early church laying down their lives for those who rejected them that love went through the whole world. Every martyr who spilled their blood. It's agape love in response to rejection. Now again, there's wisdom, there's nuance. Sometimes the way to handle rejection is shake the dust off your feet, but it's still walking in love. And it's like Jesus was operating to this truth of, I don't have to redeem myself because I'm trusting the one who will redeem all things. I don't have to redeem myself in the face of rejection because I'm trusting the one who will redeem all things. This is how we triumph in trouble. This is how we triumph in trouble. In the face of rejection, we walk in agape love. Try and bring this down a little bit. Some of you parents are in a training school for this right now. Your 2-year-old throws the broccoli back in your face. Rejection, rejection, rejection. How do you respond? Deep breath. Agape love. I'm going to continue to lay my life down for you. Gets a little bit harder when they're 12, and then when they're 22, and then when they're 42. But the way of love is, in the face of rejection, I lay my life down for your behalf because I don't need to redeem myself. I'm trusting the one who will redeem all things. Church, imagine being part of a community that was walking this way, where rumour wasn't really a thing. And if it ever rears its head, it's like, oh, the verdict over me is more important than the voices around me. That doesn't really engage with ridicule. But if it ever comes, I don't need to retaliate. I don't need to retaliate. The story I'm in is bigger than the slander that they bring. Who, when we walk through rejection, which we will, we respond with agape love. This is the revolution that Jesus brings. In the midst This one good? Okay. I thought it was going to be a very clear sign to stop then. But I can handle rejection. It's the sound man. It's like, so I hope that gives you, in the really nitty-gritty bits of life that we don't really want to actually deal with, I hope that points you to Jesus. I hope that points you to his way of love, the way that we can walk. We can really do this. We can really do this, following his example by his Spirit. But even more than that, I hope you're having a good long look at Jesus. This is who he is. This is what he's like. This is what he did. It's that thing, casting out demons. Amazing. But have you seen somebody who blesses when they're cursed? Raising the dead. I'd never want to diminish that. But I almost wonder if it's as rare as someone responding well to public rejection. This is our Jesus. This is the one we worship. This is what he's like. This is our King. I'm going to finish by reading Isaiah 53, which is almost like a poem written by the prophet Isaiah hundreds of years before Jesus was born. And in an amazing way, it captures his character. Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no majesty or beauty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces, he was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away, yet who of his generation protested? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was punished. He was assigned a grave with the wicked, and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, he will see his offspring and prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many and made intercession for the transgressors. This is your Jesus. He's here for you now.